There were petals from like a rose. And as I looked into the room, and I saw her on her back.
And it shows a WhatsApp conversation. This conversation is between Zach Hughes and John Mello. I believe he's providing Christina's phone number, which I know ends in 5142. He's saying harass the out of her.
He was continuing to communicate, harass, threaten, intimidate, bully. His communications were unlike anything I've ever encountered.
This morning, the victim's ex takes center stage in the Rose Petal murder trial. We're diving deeper into his relationship with the defendant, Zachary Hughes. And the death of Jessica Barnes is what's trending in true crime. Her husband accused of strangling her. We have a journalist who interviewed the alleged killer on the program this morning. Plus, a brand new series is coming to Court TV, Trial and Error. Why did OJ win? We've got a sneak peek for you ahead of the big premiere this weekend. And the jury could get the case today in the trial of A$AP Rocky. We'll talk about it. It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Friday morning to you, and happy Valentine's Day as well. Welcome to Opening Statements. I'm Julie Grant. Are you ready for some coffee and some court? It is that time. We got a great show planned to end the work week. Grab that cup of coffee right now. It's time for my opening statement. The Bahama Mama's out on bond. Lindsay Shiver is back on the outside after a little pre-trial stint in the slammer. The judge revoked her bond because she violated one of her bond conditions when she gave an interview to Good Morning America. Now her bond is reinstated and she can return home to her home state of Alabama while she awaits her trial. Now, I don't know who's advising the Bahama Mama, but if I were her lawyer, I would tell her to go have a seat. In fact, she should have several seats. It was her words that got her in trouble in the first place. The talk that Bahamian police uncovered in those messages that she sent to her lover and the alleged hitman, where she allegedly said, "Kill him," referring to her husband, Robert Shiver. Now, fortunately for everybody, the alleged words are really all we have in this case. We don't have a homicide. Thank goodness for that. Thank goodness Robert Shiver is still alive. But in my opinion, my friends, the biggest victims in this case are the couple's kids. And that's also where the Bahama Mama's main focus should be now that she's back out on bond. She should be quiet and she should focus on her kids. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it. Right now, it's time for your daily docket.
Bro was manufacturing the story, deleting and destroying evidence. He was trying to extort Rocky, which came through. That really was the real aggressor. Rocky used the problem to defend himself. There are two hurdles that they have to overcome to get a conviction in this case. Two hurdles. They cannot overcome them.
In California, we've got the closing arguments continuing in the A$AP Rocky assault trial. Now, that's going to start up at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We will take you there when it does. In California, or in, South Carolina, rather, we've got Brandon Barnes with a hearing at 9 a.m. This guy is accused of strangling his wife, Jessica, and we're going to be talking with a journalist who spoke to Barnes. He's going to be on the program this morning, so this should be a really interesting case for us to dive into together. And in South Carolina, we've also got the Rose Petal murder trial for Zachary Hughes. That one resumes at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And that is our top story for you this morning here on Opening Statements. The state's case continues with the cross of the lead homicide investigator. So this defendant is accused of stabbing Christina Parcell. Back in 2021, her body was found by her fiance, had rose petals scattered all around it. Now, the defendant is very close friends with the victim's ex. His name is John Mello, that guy in the middle there. Now, prosecutors say that the men had a plan to harass Parcell by sending nude photos of her colleagues, photos of her to her colleagues and to her friends. Now, the lead detective on the case revealed some text messages that were sent between the two. Take a look.
says secret phone number got I dude private Christina's.
So how did you interpret that in relation to this investigation?
I interpret that as, dude, I've got Christina's private number. It says harass of her 5142 we can the 864 out 483.
So how did you interpret that in relation to this case?
I believe he's providing Christina's phone number, which I know ends in 5142. He's saying harass the out of her.
Okay, so to boil it down, this guy is being accused of killing on behalf of or for his dear friend. Okay, that's the gist of it. There's a lot of players involved here. So what do we know about that dear friend, John Mello, the victim's ex? Let's talk about it. Let me bring in our guest now. Criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor David Bruno is on the show. And want to welcome in investigative reporter Troy Stiles, who's been in the courtroom watching this case in person every day. Good morning to you both. And Troy, I want to start with you, please. So tell us, what are the biggest things that are jumping out to you as you're watching this one in person?
Julie, it's more about what the jury is not hearing that really makes this case interesting. So this is a gruesome murder, and we see that in the crime scene. She was stabbed multiple times and drug across the floor and rose petals scattered across, the crime scene. So we've heard from forensic experts. The state has done a great job in laying out their case, but I think the jury is still questioning the motive and connections and even more circumstances in this case that are still unanswered. The defense is doing a great job in cross, but Zachary Hughes has a ton of support in the courtroom and many prominent figures in the community that are there every day to support him.
That's really interesting. Troy, thank you for that. David Bruno, when it comes to whether the state can prove this case, I'm curious what you think as a former prosecutor.
Well, the surveillance video that I hear coming out of that courtroom is going to be critical. They have the murderer coming out with clothing as well as a bicycle, and then they have surveillance video around town seeing Hughes with the same bicycle in his truck, same clothes. Then you pile on with these text messages and the communications with Mello. Really, I just have so many questions as to why. It looks like they have the right guy with the evidence that I'm hearing about, but why does Hughes, a successful pianist, go and do this for Mello? Is this for money? Is this for a friendship? Is this extortion? That's really the question I have as I'm hearing this evidence.
Right. David, you raise a really great question. How far does one go for a friend? This is about as far as it gets, if you believe the state's allegations here. And then the other part of this that Troy, you touched on it, the jury's not hearing, and this part intrigues me the most, is that this woman, this victim in the homicide, was allegedly victimizing someone else in a child porn case. Troy, what can you tell us about that?
What I can tell you is that at the center of this case is a minor child that the two shared, the victim of this case and John Mello. I actually have interviewed John Mello and sat down with him multiple times, and he tells me that he met Zachary Hughes just a handful of times with his daughter. They actually went to dinner together, and Zachary was very impressed by the daughter. And then when John Mello had to put the daughter on the plane and return her due to a Hague order, he called Zachary Hughes. And Zach came to Italy and spent some time with him there, actually several weeks. And he was very upset that John was in this situation. But is she, like you said, alleged, is she this did she victimize children and this child pornography? Was she really involved? Or is John Mello just creating these emails and all this, all this harassment based on wanting to get back at her and revenge, and led Zachary Hughes to believe it, and he was so compelled that he actually committed this brutal murder? We'll have to see what the jury thinks, but they're not hearing about the child pornography or anything else having to do with that part of this case, Julie.
Right, exactly, Troy. And David Bruno, this is a perfect question for you. Is that a problem? Do you think this is a problem, in particular for the defense, that the jury isn't hearing about this?
Well, the defense is trying to get it out. They've been trying to get it out. They tried to do it in pretrial motions. They did it last court hearing as well when they were in front of the court and said, look, the prosecutor opened the door to this. And what that means is even though there's a pretrial ruling that the child pornography found in the residence is inadmissible, they really made the custody issue very relevant by calling the guardian, the attorney, that was saying that this guy, Mello, was continuing to communicate with her and sending her images and all these things. And I guess what the defense is saying is that the reason that he's doing that and he's being an advocate in the way he did it is because of the concerns that he had with the child. And this evidence kind of supports that as the why a parent would actually go to that length and those lengths by sending emails and communications to the guardian. So that's where the defense is standing up and saying they opened the door to this coming in because that was the concern that Mello had.
David, thank you for that. We know that Christina Parcells' fiance, Bradley Post, does have an active child pornography case. The jury can't know that's his case. They just know he's wearing the orange jumpsuit. Troy, you saw him testify. And one thing I'm so curious about is if you noticed any reaction from the jurors, if you got any sense of how they might have received Mr. Post and his testimony.
Julie, all jurors know about Bradley Post is that he has 9 charges. They have no idea what any of those charges are. And one of those charges is buggery as well, which in South Carolina, this is not going to fly well. If the jury happens to find out what Bradley Post's charges are and they connect all the dots in this case, Zachary Hughes could get off.
Wow. Yeah, no, this is really something.
I don't know how that would happen, though. I mean, the forensics. You got the forensics underneath the fingernails of the victim on Hughes. You have the surveillance. It's going to be a difficult case, even with that stuff.
Yeah, it is. This is something out of a crime drama novel, yet this case really has happened here. Here we are, and waiting to hear about the next story we're going to be talking about. Talk about twists and turns. Troy and David, you're both staying on the program, and we're so grateful for that. My friends, we're going to hit our first break. Wait till you see what we have coming up here on Opening Statements.
I always wanted a life with Jessica. I wanted it just to be me and her. I just wish I could have given her the world.
That's alleged killer Brandon Barnes talking about his missing wife days before he was arrested for her murder. And guess what? Troy Stiles spoke with him. He's going to share with us what was shared with him. And closing arguments expected to wrap up today in the ASAP Rocky trial in Los Angeles. Who's tipping the scales, the prosecution or the defense? We had 2 great closers going before the jury. We'll discuss it later in the show.
The victim had been brutally stabbed multiple times.
A single mother found dead. An unsettling crime scene.
With rose petals scattered around her.
The suspect, a classically trained concert pianist.
Now a jury must decide, did this musician
commit murder?
I think there's meaning and significance to everything a killer does.
The Rose Petal Murder Trial, today, only on Court TV.
There's 3 total co-defendants. They took the body down to a location near Lake Hartwell, and they disposed of the body by burning the body in a plastic tote. Miss Mims served as a lookout during the burning of the body, and she also was just intimately involved in the process of getting rid of the body.
That was Kendall Mims in court last December for her alleged part in the murder of Jessica Barnes. Now this morning, the man in the middle is due to appear in a courtroom in South Carolina. Brandon Barnes is accused of strangling his wife Jessica to death. Police say it happened last fall at their home, a pool house that belonged to Mims' family. Now prosecutors say that Brandon then got their 2 roommates to help dispose of his wife's body. Now, Barnes admits to having sexual relationships with those two roommates, Kendall Mims and Victoria Tippett. During a chance meeting, Brandon Barnes was interviewed about his wife's disappearance, and this is just days before he became a suspect in her murder. He spoke to Troy Stiles about his last words to his wife.
She cried and told me she loved me, but I didn't think nothing of it. I just thought it was happy tears. I gave her a hug and I said, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through what you're going through. We're gonna get you help if you need it. I'm here for you. I'm supportive. And she knew I had to go to work because money, us, we never had stuff, so we had to work for stuff growing up. So other kids, they have it a little easier and a little boost. We didn't have a boost in life. And I was supporting a baby in Kendall, and Kendall started working, which helped a lot. It was just trying to set a goal of getting us out of the house so me and her could start a life together. And Kendall knew that after the end of the year, I would separate to be with Jessica, and I would definitely visit my little girl when I can. So that was the plan? That was the plan, was to have a life with Jessica. Her mom always thought it wasn't. Her mom never believed. It was always judgmental. I always wanted a life with Jessica. I wanted it just to be me and her. But I was always broke. I didn't have no money. Couldn't afford a house. Didn't have good credit. I just wish I could have given her the world.
You know, it seems, based on his interview with Troy, that this guy was all about making excuses. I'm going to play a little bit more of what he said for you now. Take a listen.
I was traumatized as a kid and stuff, and my childhood was never really, I wasn't raised proper. I wasn't taught, hey, this is wrong, this is right. But I grew up knowing what I knew that was wrong and right, but I wasn't disciplined growing up much. But after Catherine, I chose for a better life, and that was what I was going for, and I've been doing good. The only problem I have is a big sex addiction, and that's one thing I learned when I was going through my alleged punishment in jail with Catherine. And there was a class in there about it, and I didn't even know it was even a thing until later when I got out and I started getting a little older and I started realizing, you got a problem with sex. But I really thought nothing of it. I thought it was normal, but deep down it ruins relationships.
My goodness, this guy making all kinds of excuses. He was traumatized as a kid. He's a sex addict. And remember, at this point in time, when he's talking to Troy, Jessica is still missing, and he has not been charged with her murder. So let's bring back in journalist Troy Stiles. He's also the family spokesperson now for Jessica Barnes's family. So Troy, I want to start with how Brandon, what was it like? Let's talk about what was it like being in the room with him, talking to Victoria, talking to Kendall, the lovers and the roommates, all prior to the time that they became criminal defendants.
Yeah, well, as you said, they are criminal defendants now, but at that time they were just suspects and hadn't actually even been named as suspects in this case. Jessica was still missing, and it's kind of by chance that I encountered them in the town square. They had recently just fled to Colorado and then immediately came right back, and then I just saw this guy hanging a poster and went and asked him if he was Brandon Barnes. When he said he was, asked, I interviewed him and get us out of this story, and we sat down in the middle of the night in the middle of the town square. It's a small town, under 4,000 people, and you can hear the crickets in the background, and an owl shows up and starts hooting in the tree. I mean, it was just a bizarre scenario, but I really let Brandon take control of this first interview as I was trying to build a rapport with him, to try to get him to open up to me. And you'll hear that as we go through the audio. It was quite bizarre.
It really was. And love what you asked him. I want to listen to his response when you asked him about how he would feel if they found his wife, Jessica.
But if you find out that something bad's happened to her, and Kendall's in North Carolina, who do you have? How are you going to handle that? I wouldn't think like that. Honestly, deep down, I don't want to get into those thoughts, but deep down, I would break down. Break down bad.
What did you think of his response, Troy?
Well, I wasn't sure really what to make of it, but I knew that everything that he was saying was just fabricated in his own mind, and everything was about him. Anything that I asked him about Jessica or anything about his, her feelings for him, it just all circled back around him and his abuse and nothing about Jessica. So, I mean, she's the victim in this case and she's missing. I mean, how would you feel if your wife goes missing, right? Well, he didn't have anything to say about his emotions about her being missing. He just had to say about his emotions, about how the people were looking at him in the town and just really what people's perspective was of him. He didn't care anything about Jessica being missing.
Wow. Troy, what is Jessica's family thinking about all of this, about what is this sick, disgusting plot, if you will? We have a homicide and we have a cover-up, and police have charged them all. What is the family's reaction?
Julie, they burned her body completely, and they don't have all of Jessica back yet. She's evidence in this case. And so as we proceed into these hearings, which is the first time Brandon and the other defendants in this case have actually been into the courtroom, it's jarring for the family. The only thing they have left of Jessica is her Bible, which Brandon found a letter in her Bible addressed to him that she wasn't supposed to find for 10 years. But the family is riveted in this case. They're horrified at how she died, the abuse that led up to her murder, and the fact that they saw her go through all of this abuse, and to know that she died at the hands of Brandon Barnes, her abuser, it's just shaking.
Brandon, it's hard not to cry tears when you hear what you just said, that all the family has is her Bible.
Yeah, Julie. I mean, he burned everything that she had, all of her possessions. Jessica had actually left Brandon the night before. He said he didn't want her anymore, and she left. She had it. She went to her mom's house and her things were on her porch, and they actually transported Jessica to the hospital. And she should have been under a psychiatric hold, but she wasn't. And Brandon was able to catch back up to her. He took her to his house, and then we learned that he actually murdered her the next day. So it's horrifying, and it seems that it could have been prevented. There were so many warning signs in this case. She actually was pregnant before this murder and lost her baby to fetal decomposition. But many have alleged that he beat the baby out of her, and we don't have any evidence of that. And of course, he's not charged in that as a crime or as a suspect. But there's so much abuse in this case, Julian. What we're learning is that fatal strangulation is a common occurrence. And if you have ever been strangled by your partner, you're 800 times more likely to die by homicide. So this is something that is in all of our headlines across the country. And South Carolina is the only state in the nation that doesn't have legislation to support non-fatal strangulation, which we need very desperately in South Carolina.
Wow. That's a segment for another day. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Troy. Certainly a sign of lethality in a relationship, as you said, if there's strangulation. Tell me, when we think about these other two women, let's go through them. So talking first about Kendall and then Victoria. Brandon has a child with Kendall, but my understanding, Troy, he lied to his wife, Jessica, and said that the baby was his niece because he lied and said that Kendall was actually his sister. Do I have that right?
You do, Julie. In fact, Kendall lied as well and kept the front up that she was his sister. And then Jessica later, of course, found out that the child that she was giving birth to was in fact Brandon's. So, that's what I think has captured everybody's attention is, the people in this case, the characters and them living together and that sort of thing. And Brandon is like this playboy. But, all Jessica wanted to be was a good wife. And the only thing she wanted, she had this whole list of things that she wrote out that she wanted to give. And the only thing she wanted was one thing, that was to be loved. And Brandon wouldn't do that. So as far as Kendall goes, Kendall, she's a great girl. She's smart. She wants to be a prostheticist. And, she had plans of going to college and she knew exactly what she wanted to do. And Julie, the question's out there, is she a victim too? So victimization can cause a lot of times people to become suspects or criminals. So, while she's charged in this case with misprision of a felony and obstruction of justice, we're not sure that she's not a victim herself.
Oh, that's an interesting take. Troy, I appreciate that. And when you look at this from Jessica's perspective, because it seems weird as we look at it from the outside, these people living together and he's having sex with all of them. But from Jessica's perspective, she's convinced Kendall is his sister and the baby is her niece. And then Victoria's her friend, right? Troy, Victoria was actually Jessica's friend first.
No. So Kendall and Brandon lived together first, and then Victoria was kind of the fresh person on the scene. Victoria was only there for just a few weeks before this murder occurred. So I think that was a dynamic that caused the abuse and possibly, the relationship to shift so much there when it did. And in a second interview that I conducted with them, they kind of elaborate deeper into that. But yeah, Kendall was there first, and they actually lived in Kendall's grandfather's pool house. And I think Kendall's family felt like this was a safer situation for Kendall to be in, where she could be, under the eyes of her grandfather, who actually played a very instrumental role in, tracking them, along with, he placed trackers in the car and he was able to give that as evidence to authorities. And that's how we were actually able to locate her body. But yeah, I mean, Victoria kind of showed up right before Jessica's murder. And, my part 2 of our interview is not out yet, but I asked Victoria in part 2, are you a mean girl? She seems like a very mean girl. She has no empathy at all for Jessica being missing. And we later found out that she was actually in the room and witnessed Jessica's murder. And the whole time in these interviews, there's a lot of laughing. It's aggravating to listen to, even myself.
Oh my gosh. This is a horrifying case. And you certainly have so much inside scoop. Troy Stiles, we appreciate you sharing all of this. And of course, at the forefront of our reporting here on Opening Statements is the victim, Jessica Barnes. And please let us know how her family is doing, and we'll continue the conversation as these cases progress. As you know, Troy, Brandon Barnes is going to be in court this morning at 10 a.m. And so we're going to watch some of his proceedings together. Troy Stiles, a big thank you to you for coming on the program and sharing your interviews with us. Still to come here on Opening Statements, we've got a brand new series premiering this weekend on Court TV. Have you heard? It's all about O.J. Simpson's murder case, and it's a fresh take on it. Why did O.J. win? We have our very own Ted Rollins joining us on the couch next.
Relly threatened Rocky, Relly threatened Schwelby, Relly repeatedly punched Dills and ragdoll Dills, and we're going to show you that again on the video. Slowly. You had it narrated to you, but you can see it on the video.
Plus, closing arguments continue this morning in the ASAP Rocky trial. We're talking about what could tip the scales.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the information. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Ronald Lyle Goldman, a human being, as charged in count 2 of the information.
It's been 30 years since the O.J. Simpson trial captivated the country, and many of us remember where we were during the chase or during the reading of the verdict. And this Sunday night, Court TV premieres a brand new docuseries that attempts to answer the question, why did O.J. win? What went right for the defense, and what went wrong for the prosecution? Here's a sneak peek.
After the recital, it's well documented that Nicole's family went to eat at Mezzaluna. And that's where her mother left her glasses, and that's when Ron Goldman, a waiter at Mezzaluna, comes into the mix.
He was friends with Nicole, and my brother offered to drop them off on his way out that night.
So on the way to Marina Del Rey, Ron stopped by Nicole's to drop off glasses, and that's how that happened.
I was working that day, and I heard about Nicole's murder, and as it was stated on the news, Nicole and a friend were murdered. And I came home, and as soon as I walked in the door, Patty started calling Fred. There's somebody calling, something about Ron. When I picked up the phone, it was somebody calling from the coroner's office. And they asked me if I had heard about what happened during the day. And I said, what does that have to do with me? And she said, your son was the other victim. That's how I was told, over the phone by a coroner.
When was the last time you saw him?
November of '93 at my stepsister's bat mitzvah.
Obviously, this is your older brother. We don't get to spend very much time together, so I'm very glad that I was able to be here and spend this time with you, because God knows where I'll be in a year.
Ron Goldman was the classic case of wrong place, wrong time. It was just horrible. And Kim, his sister, I don't believe has ever gotten over it.
Here to talk about it, Court TV anchor and the executive producer of Trial and Error, Why Did O.J. Win, Ted Rowlands. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Oh, great to have you here. And wow, I can't wait to watch this. Ted, I was thinking about how there's still an appetite for this. People still want to talk about
Netflix just dropped a 4-part series. Ours is a 7-part series. It's going to start Sunday and goes for 7 weeks. And really you could do 100 weeks. I mean, there was so much to this case, and we went back and looked at all of the archive video from Court TV, because this was a case that put Court TV on the map. Let's face it, it was up and running, but no one was watching, and then OJ came, and it really changed the appetite for Americans to watch a drama of a courtroom unfold. And Court TV was there for it all. We went back and we've done interviews over the years. You did a fantastic interview with F. Lee Bailey before he passed in 2021. We used a lot of that because it's a look at the trial through the eyes of the players 25, 30 years later, and that's unique, and it's interesting because they take you back to those big moments. Right. And what was going on behind the scenes. Alan Dershowitz and F. Lee Bailey's great. His story of O.J. putting the gloves on.
Yes, a lot of people don't know this.
Yeah, and during your interview that you did with him, before he passed, it's fascinating. He baited Chris Darden into doing it, basically saying, I dare you to have him try him on.
He sure did.
Because if you don't, I will. And sure enough, it became one of the most iconic moments in trial history. So it's a lot of errors. What did the prosecution do wrong, like you said, and what did the defense do right? And then also the time.
Right,
a lot of this was a perfect storm where O.J. Simpson was found not guilty of double murders. There's the moment, right? We're working on that episode right now because we're putting that in the 6th episode, and the whole thing. Watching it over, I've watched it a bunch of times. The whole thing as it comes through in the courtroom is just fascinating.
It is. Well, I think it's really great the premise that you and our documentary team came up with to tackle the question that you probably get more than any other question. I know I do. Is how did he win? How did he win? When
with
people
all this evidence,
with all the evidence, how did he?
It makes sense. It was a perfect storm. Domestic violence back then was different. It just was, and the defense did a great job of saying, a domestic abuser is not a murderer, and the jury bought it. You had the dream team, 5 of the most accomplished lawyers of the time together. Now they didn't get along, and we get into that too. Right. But they were up against some career prosecutors who were outmatched in the courtroom. And then you had the post riots of 1992 and 3. Reginald Denny and the Rodney King and the L.A. riots, and the cops had just been found not guilty in the beating of Rodney King. So the mistrust of the LA Police Department at that time was so dramatic that, the idea of cops planning stuff made sense. And then you have Furman. And we interview Mark Fuhrman, and we have a whole episode on Mark Fuhrman. You take one of these things out of the equation, I think O.J. will be found guilty. But all of it came together in this perfect storm.
You're right, it was a perfect storm for him. And a stunning storm, still for a lot of people who look back on it. Did you find, was there anything that you learned that maybe surprised you or you didn't know before? Even having covered the case and watched all of the various coverage that we've done on it through the years, through producing the doc, did you find anything out that you were like, oh wow?
One of the interviews we did was a guy named Haywood Galbraith. He was a photographer for the LA Sentinel, which was the African-American magazine, newspaper, daily newspaper, in not only Los Angeles, but they syndicated throughout the country in African-American press. And at the time, it was being covered through the eyes of the African-American experience with law enforcement. And he is, he still thinks that O.J. didn't do it. Because he watched the entire trial and everything that happened made sense to him in terms of, well, the blood was planted, on the socks, and the glove was brought over by Fuhrman. And that was, we got a taste of it after the verdict where there were these two different, shots of people reacting.
Right.
People were cheering, African-American people for the most part cheering, and then the white America shocked, like, what? Because this case did a bunch of things. It brought to light the treatment of minorities by police in major cities, and we're still seeing it. George Floyd, how many years later? Same thing. And then it also put a spotlight on domestic violence. You look at those audio of Nicole, it's just horrific.
It is horrifying to hear back, right? And the way O.J. Simpson might have been treated a bit differently because he was O.J. Simpson and he was such a big celebrity at the time.
Absolutely. I had a big part of it. Was his celebrity, and people went into it thinking there's no way O.J. could have done this.
Oh, man. And Ted, I can't wait I could talk to you all morning about this. I'm going to be watching Pop the Popcorn Sunday night. Thank you so much, my friend. Just a little reminder, again, it's called Trial and Error. Why did O.J. win? Brand new Court TV docuseries premiering this Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it. It's only on your favorite network, Court TV. And coming up next here on Opening Statements, we're talking about the fate of A$AP Rocky could be in the hands of the jury. Will the closing arguments tip the scales of justice?
Nobody could believe that he would be a killer. It just didn't seem to make sense.
Today, my office filed murder charges against O.J. Simpson.
Whoa, what just happened?
It was the biggest story in the world.
The composition of that jury proved to be the most fatal error for the prosecution.
Trial and Error. Why did O.J. win? A Court TV original series. Premieres Sunday night, 8 Eastern and Pacific. Only on Court TV.
Brianna, are you hoping this wraps up today? Are you hoping this wraps up today? Are you worried at all about the possible verdict?
Superstar Rihanna leaving the LA County Courthouse on Thursday. She was there with her kids to support her partner A$AP Rocky as he's on trial in a felony firearm assault case. Now, the closing arguments started on Thursday, but they're going to resume today. So the defense still has yet to finish theirs, and then the state will get a chance for rebuttal, then deliberations start. If you missed it, the state pointed to Rocky's intentions and his decision-making on the day in question, while the defense focused on reasonable doubts in the case against the Grammy-nominated rapper.
That man decided, for whatever reason, that he was going to settle his dispute with Mr. Efron that night with a gun. That he was going to do that in the middle of Hollywood. And that he was going to fire his gun not once, but twice. Those decisions had consequences, and you know the results of those decisions. And that is what we are asking you to hold him accountable for in this case.
There are two hurdles that they have to overcome to get a conviction in this case. Two hurdles. They cannot overcome them. One is that the object in Rocky's hand on November 6, 2021 was not a prop gun, beyond the reasonable doubt. Second is that Rocky did not act in self-defense. Your bills. The judge instructed you, if the prosecution failed to prove the object in Rocky's hand was not a prop gun beyond a reasonable doubt, the case is over. It's over.
All right, so again, the closing's not done yet. Joe Tacopina still has more to go for the defense, and then I'm going to predict it's going to be John Lewin, the deputy district attorney, very well known, not just in LA County, but nationwide, particularly for his work on the Robert Durst case and other cases. Now, let's talk about who's tipping the scales and what's tipping them. Let's bring back in attorney David Bruno. All right, David, so what is tipping the scales for you in this trial, please?
When we talk about tipping the scales, let's put the burden on the prosecutor, because the defendant is presumed innocent and the prosecutor has the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So when we talk about tipping, it's their burden. The defendant doesn't have to do anything. They don't have to cross-examine. They don't have to put on witnesses. It's still the prosecutor's burden. And I have problems with that. I don't know that they have gotten over that. I mean, maybe on a civil case, more possible than not, but beyond a reasonable doubt, here's why. The police had the scene for a while and they couldn't find the casings. There was no evidence of a projectile. The injury on the alleged victim is a scrape on the hand versus a gunshot. The credibility of the alleged victim and his demands for money before going to police, the recording that he was going to take millions. It may not have been enough in a civil case, but when we're talking about tipping scales, government has the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And yeah, he's going to come up with a rebuttal, and that is the ultimate advantage for prosecutors when they get rebuttals, because they go first in the closing argument, then the defense gets one shot, and then the prosecutor gets to come up again in a rebuttal. It's not like that in every single state, but they got it here. And it's got to be one great rebuttal if they're going to tip the scales, Julie.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that the truth, David? Yeah, I think that's why they're going to save the big guns for last. John Lewin, who we know will leave no stone unturned in any case and will not leave any argument, that could be made off. What do I want to say? He's going to make every argument possible here, running out of time. David, tell me, when we think about the defense theory here, they floated out a theory that this was a prop gun. They acknowledged he had it in his hand. It's on videotape, said there were shots fired, but blanks came out. Can you think of anything better they could have done under these circumstances with the evidence that implicates Rocky?
No, I mean, they had to explain the gun. It was on video. That's the problem, right? I mean, that's why the government felt so strong about their case, is because of the video that we're watching. And they have all of the identifications all lined up too. ASAP Rocky had that sweatshirt on. There it is right there, right? Because they had it on video. So what else could they have possibly done but try to explain that that is not a real gun, it's a prop gun. He happened to use prop guns in other music videos. He had witnesses come in that said he would regularly carry a prop gun. There were no casings found. These are all good things to support reasonable doubt. I think the one thing that I have a problem with on the defense side is that they weren't able to produce the prop gun. And that was something the prosecutor is arguing in closing. Where's the prop gun? If there was a prop gun, that would be something maybe we would expect them to bring in.
Yes, David, I'm with you 100% on that. I was surprised that they didn't, or at least something, some pictures of it, something to show this jury so they can see what we're talking about here. We've got to leave it there. We're out of time. David Bruno, thank you for everything. Thank you at home for watching Opening Statements. When we come back, it is time for Court TV Live. We've got a special interview coming up with one of the prosecutors on the Baby Evelyn murder trial.